And oh my goodness, happy Tuesday, everyone. It is so wonderful to see all y'all. I don't know why I always say that because I can't see you, but I'm assuming that y'all are out there. Hundreds and thousands are gathering around your computers and your laptops just to listen to the Black Diva Collective Live. Hello, every beautiful body out there. My name is Blair G. Hervey. I am the founder and CEO of The Corporate Strategist. I'm joined by my colorful co host, my bestie, soul friend of 20 plus years, as well as self-proclaimed diversity geek D'Angelo Crane. Say hello, D'Angelo.
Hello, bestie, and my Whitley to my Dwayne. There you go. I am excited today again to bring a little light, love, and laughter to the Diva Collective live stage. So it's always a pleasure to be here with you, as I always say.
Fantastic. And a big welcome to our guest, Jared Pigeon. We are so excited to have you. Please tell me I said your name correctly.
You did. Yes, yes. Well, welcome everybody, and glad to be here. Happy Pride Month. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into it and welcome everyone to the Black Diva Collective Live. D'Angelo, you want to get us started with I keep calling it our sunny segment. Do you even like that?
I love it. I love it. And I'm excited because our guest today has great hair and great glasses. You know, I'm a fan of, I wanted the big hair, but my hair just said stop growing after a while. So I had to change it up and go with the locks. But because I was like, I want big hair. Didn't I, Blair? I wanted big hair and it just would not get big at
And it would
all.
just go,
It,
yeah.
yes, Anyhow, Blair, what we do every day here on the Black Diva Collective is we do what we call the art of the check-in, and that's where we take a moment to just really dig a little deeper and see how each of us are feeling today. And the reason why we do that is because we are asking leaders to start doing that. If you want to build empathy, vulnerability, connection, and belonging on your teams, the way to do it is just to start by doing this little bitty practice of just really checking in and doing some check-ins below the surface level check-ins that you normally do. So we're going to practice that right now. All right, Jared, how are you doing today? How's your heart? How's your mind? How's your soul? And did I say your name right? I think she said Jared, right? But you tell me if it's not right. But how's your heart, mind, and soul today?
Yes. Well, name correct. Pronunciation is very well. I'm doing all right. Today's been a busy day. I'm on a college campus, and so we have new students coming in. So it's a time in which I'm energized because right now I'm seeing new bodies, seeing our staff out there, with the family. The kids are done with school now. And so we're working on some things. We're really working on strengthening our relationship between, dad and children. And so that's kind of where my main focus is at right now. And so I'm in an optimistic place.
Ooh,
I love that. I love that. I can't wait till we go into that. That seems like some very significant, important work there. Blair, how's your heart, mind, soul? How are you feeling today?
Ooh, baby, she's overwhelmed. Okay. So for any of my entre newbies out there, new entrepreneurs, new CEOs, I am right here with you. I know that it can be a challenge, but as long as you are mission focused, you are a mission focused messenger. You are here and you are called to make a difference. So keep pushing, keep thriving, and keep smiling because, it does kind of help with the endorphins. So overall, A-okay. D'Angelo, how are you feeling? How's your heart? How's your soul? How's your wardrobe? How's your bayang today?
Oh, this her is given today. So I think we're good today. You know what? I am in a place of a peace and purpose. That's what I would say today. So I'm trying to find what my peace is, and I'm continuing to define what my purpose is. And I think sometimes defining your purpose and living in your purpose isn't always easy. And I think what we say, what we want sometimes is not always easy. There is some challenges and bumps in the road, but it's worth it, right? And so that's what it is. Just when you're in a place of finding purpose and living in your purpose, it's not always going to be easy, but it's always going to be worth it. So that's what you have to remind yourself each and every day.
I feel like all of those should either go on a t-shirt or they should be Facebook posts or something. But I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be careful, right? What you pray for. Amen. But today we have prayed for a wonderful guest and an awesome conversation. I thank each of them for being vulnerable and sharing how they're feeling today. But Jared actually has 12 years of professional experience in higher education. Jared Pigeon is the director for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and serves as the campus diversity officer for from Minnesota State University, Moorhead, MSUM. He's also a Men's State System Diversity Officer leader across the state. In his roles, he serves in a collaborative advisory capacity to the campus administration, to students, to employees, and the community at large. In addition, he leads staff that provides programming and services to students out of the American Indian Center, the Intercultural Center, the Rainbow Dragon Center, and the Women's Center. Woo! I thought people got tired of hearing my bio. I just, woo! I mean, all the words. Yes, Jared.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Welcome. Glad to be here. Very, very honored. Glad to be here. You know, D'Angelo, Blair, thank you. And before we get started, I'm going to go with picture number 2 on the profile that you were asking for 1 or 2 on the vote. So I'm going with number 2 on that vote.
Thank you. And for anyone who doesn't know what he's talking about, Making 100K Without a Degree, Your Mental Growth Guide to Financial Freedom will be released in the next couple of weeks. And my community is helping me decide on that book cover. So thank you, Jared. And thank you again for being here today. I can't wait to hop into this valuable conversation, but I love to make sure that we make space for our guests to actually tell us a little bit about themselves, particularly why you decided to get into this work and what that pivotal moment was that said, I'm the person for this job.
Yeah, no, great question. You know, and as I've reflected on that over the years, I've found this work to be more of a calling, you know, for myself than a particular instance in life. Little bit about me. I'm a biracial man. I identify as African American and Caucasian. My mother being Caucasian, my father being African American. They met. He was in the Air Force. So I was primarily, you know, raised around Caucasian folks living with mom. And so what that meant is also being in the North sometimes. Here I'd be the only person of color in the environment, in the community, and even in my family for a while there. My grandma had 9 kids, and my mom and her sister were the only one that had 2 African-American children. And so from early on in my life, race was present. And as I evolved, you know, through growing up, you know, stopping in and out of school, coming to find what it was that I was really going to be good at, I found that there was a strong calling for this need around diversity, equity, and inclusion showing up and being present. And so I kind of found my way into it when I was in my undergraduate sociology and criminal justice program. Okay.
You know, I definitely appreciate that. Thank you for being so clear on that journey. I think a lot of us can definitely relate to our lived experiences leading to leadership in this space and thought leadership. But let's get on into this conversation.
All right. Yes, I'm ready. I'm going right into the difference between equity and equality is that equality is everyone gets the same thing. And equity is that everyone gets the things they deserve. D. Ray McKesson. You know, right now we're seeing some reports that the educational equity gap is really where, to get a little bit of context around this today's subject, when we talk about examining the equity gap, and we're really particularly today talking about when we think about education, right? Since we have someone who's working in that field. So we're going to try to keep the conversation narrow, but if we go other places, just go there with us, right? And so really it's talking about there's a significant or persistent disparity in educational attainment between different groups of students, right? And the studies are showing right now when these gaps start with the K through 12 education, where 87% of white students graduate at a high school level on time compared to 76% of Hispanic and 73% of Black students, right? And so that to give you a context today around what we're talking about and why this is such a vital conversation. We're talking about the equity gap because this continues when we see it in higher education. And then even when we think about the pay equity gap that we see for Black women, right, in corporate America and Black men. So this is a continuous thing here. So Jared, talk to me a little bit about when, you know, how should higher education institutions and the communities what should they be doing differently to increase the number of students graduating at high schools? What type of programs or interventions or pipelines should they be creating or engaged in to help increase this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And you're spot on with those stats. And just to add to that, our indigenous students even have a lower graduation rate of, you know, our high school students, anywhere from 35 to 45%. And so that right there is also particularly concerning when we think about the relationship that we have to land, in which this being indigenous land and in the history. One of the things that we're doing is we're beginning to work with 7th and 8th grade students in our public schools on leadership development, on cultural awareness, on relationship building. And so we're beginning to tap down in that funnel into that 7th and 8th grade. I know for me, like I said, I had a non-traditional path. 10th grade was the last year in high school that I later went and did my GED, and now working on the doctorate degree, completed the master's. But I tell you, it wasn't, it wasn't because there was, I tell folks I kind of landed into it by accident. But what happened with me, and this is what I think can go to serve as what we can do, is that my father used to tell me, my stepfather, that education was the equalizer. And so I think one of the things that we can do is we can begin to change the narrative that our youth have. And obviously school needs to be a little bit more exciting, a little bit more entertaining. So this summer program, we're doing it 3 days a week. We have a 6-hour schedule. We have field trips and leadership. I would say that's one of the biggest strategies that can go, is tap down early. The other thing is, when you create these channels of engagement with students that are already on a college campus, it allows youth to visualize themselves. And so by them seeing other students that also look like them and even came from their high school, really increases the rate in which they will attend college. And we know attendance is the first step. And so the second step is, how do we retain the students? And that's where, like we say with the cultural and identity centers that we have, is engaging students through leadership, through programming, and through involvement and engagement are really ways in which then we can keep the students engaged.
Mm. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I love hearing, again, some of these tangible things, even things that we can apply in the workplace, whether it's tap into folks early, thinking about that pipeline between high school and getting into the professional world, or just, tapping into those entry level professionals and seeing, what's resources and things that they need as well. When I think about, my time in the workplace, I mean, it's been a couple decades, right? Okay. And I think about a lot of laws that have come into place, a lot of legislation that's come into place that has protected our human rights. Particularly most recently, when I think about, Black women, I think about the Crown Act. But there have been things globally, lots of global legislation that's helped organizations be much more compliant in this way as well. So just to name a few, Japan most recently compels businesses to disclose their gender pay and equity gaps and report that gap data in 2023. In 2023 as well, the European Parliament approved a groundbreaking law, the Pay Transparency Directive, that will actually change how businesses operate by mandating pay equity compliance. And also that same day, Australia made broad changes to the Fair Work Act. So when I think about some of this legislation, this all impacts all of us, particularly as it pertains to pay. What would you say, if anything, whether it's in academia or in the workplace, what law or what legislation needs to be put in place to enforce that compliance for any equity gap, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, and this is a good example of where you live really can depend on some of the environment in which you're in. Minnesota just passed some of the most historic legislation in the history of our nation. Now, this wasn't by accident. This was due to the direct increase of BIPOC females, LGBTQ represented younger individuals, and which really changed the dynamic of our legislation. Some things that we passed were these trans inclusive laws within our state, because we're also a border state right next to North Dakota and Wisconsin. And if most folks have been following them are some of the toughest states that have been passing what people are calling these anti-DEI laws, along with some of the stuff that's Florida's doing. So in a direct opposition to that, right, within Minnesota, We can embrace cultural identity. We can embrace gender identity. We can embrace sexual orientation. We can have dialogues about the narrative of America and really get down to the truth. I think affirmative action was a big one, which we see under attack also at the nation level. But then also finding ways. One thing that Minnesota did was within their union contracts for teachers, they put in here, and some folks may not have known this, but they put in some specific language. Usually bargaining units are around seniority. Well, we know those last hired are the first fired, right? But in this, there was a specific clause that said if you identify as a BIPOC teacher, even though you may be lower on the seniority roll, your position is safe. And so I think some direct changes like that, right, that kind of shake up the status quo. Not saying that we don't value seniority, but however, many folks have been excluded from the workforce.
Ah, well said.
I love it. I think let's dig into that a little bit more because I think you probably may have a little perspective on this. So when you think about the laws that they passed in Florida and in Texas around not providing any funding for DEI efforts at public colleges, what are the implications of that at those schools? Those schools won't be able to do now that they have been able to do when it comes to those efforts?
Yeah, well, I think the most recent thing was we seen that there was the banning of the poem that was read during the inauguration of Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And so, yes, and so seeing things like that, what that does right there unequivocally is it lessens your exposure to content in the world. And so one thing by unilaterally swiping out these curriculum is that you then put forth a workforce that by nature is less informed and also by nature is less able to then interact and operate in a diverse society. Somebody told me a few years ago, and it may be true, it may have sped up. They said, if not the second boss that you have, or by the third, the company that you may have will have a very strong tie to an international entity. And so one thing we teach students is how to critically engage, how to work across differences, build on similarities. And so if we remove a section of our historical narrative from young minds, it's going to, what I would say is, create less creativity, and it'll provide a gap of knowledge in which we won't be able to start on a shared understanding.
Yeah, because it seems to me not only are you removing books, not only are you saying we can't talk about the history of how African Americans got to this country and the work they're doing, but now you're also saying when you're pulling back on some of that funding for those things, we can't even go out and have initiatives to hire Black and brown teachers into our colleges because you're taking that money away too. So it seems very much centered on whiteness and that kind of conservative movement of not telling the stories and allowing people to be there to tell the stories. So yeah. All right, but I'm sorry.
You're fine. And so, but when I think about that too, I think about, our allies and the folks that don't identify as, Black or diverse or et cetera. Or again, just plainly just white folks. It's really important that we all know the history. That way it's not repeated and we can continue to grow. One of your hot three that we just started calling it, just to make sure that people leave with, at least three things from these conversations that they can either go do or research, is knowing your data. And so in the spirit of what you just shared, what can we do differently, or what can folks do differently to make sure that they do know their data? And what data are you referring to?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Not knowing the data is going to position you in a least powerful argument. So some of the data that I would start with would be understanding the dynamics of who's working at your organization or who's attending your organization. Sometimes we can identify these because we have forms that ask folks race and gender identity, but sometimes we don't. And if we don't, then that means, we probably should. I mean, definitely if it's going to illuminate some gaps. So one thing I would say is who are those that are working at your organization? Not only who is working at there, your HR should also be able to provide you with some disaggregated data based on the length of the tenure or the length of the employment within those individuals. Say, for example, if you have 10% BIPOC individuals and you find out that through a data analysis that only 2% of them stay at that company for more than 2 years, when you compare that to Caucasian data and you maybe see that 60% of them stay for more than 2 years, right there, that gives you an avenue to go in. It gives you a direct place in which you could create a strategy around. And so sometimes you have to ask those questions. And it's good to start at the top level with some of that, what I would call less confrontational information around who's working here and how long are they working at our company, which most companies should be able to provide to the employees and provide them with updates around that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
So what are three things that higher education institutions should be doing to retain and to help Black students graduate?
Yep. Well, I think the first thing is that the environments need to reflect the diverse identities. So what does that look like? I mean, that looks more than what we call the 3Fs, the food, fun, and festival. Now, there is its place for that, right? We need to have the MLK celebration. We need to have our Black History Month. However, it should be coupled with some sort of action, some sort of empowerment. So that would be the thing. First thing, I would say the environment. The second thing is that we need to build in resources and support structures that are able to proactively outreach to students prior to them experiencing problems. Like example, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and our staff, our academic support center, our various counseling offices that can reach out and provide some proactive resources to folks so that if things do get bad, they know where to go. And the third thing is, I think we need to critically understand the needs that our students have. If this is around financial aid, if this is around imposter syndrome, we know many of us, and even myself at times, wonders like, hey, I mean, when's the gig going to be up, right? Because you always feel that you're not as qualified, right, as a Black, brown, indigenous, as a female, employee. And so kind of overcoming that. And that also filters down into the student, so into the classroom. And so it's the third would be understanding their needs, moving past, like I said, the surface. If it's a predominantly white institution and we have diverse students, there's no need in not addressing what we call the elephant in the room. I mean, we already understand some of these things, so just go ahead and get it out. Because like you had mentioned with Blair about the allies, is that you're right. This game is lonely and it's hard, and without allies, it's almost impossible.
Yeah. Well said. I was just thinking about Trent's time, my son's time at Central Washington University. I think I shared with you before. And that's actually one of the most diverse campuses, but I believe it's either on or near a Native American reservation, I want to say. So it was quite a different experience for him. So he was instantly looking for representation. He was instantly looking for those groups. And so when I think about equity, particularly in the workplace, right, I usually put the onus on the corporation. Like, y'all need to be doing this. This isn't fair, or we need to be paid equally. In that situation with my son, I put the onus on him, right? The responsibility for you to either feel included or to go get what you need out of this experience is on you. Go seek out, your Black student unions and, et cetera. What is your perspective on where that responsibility falls as far as addressing that equity gap?
Yeah, I think you give a good example, and it's something that I think parents, have to instill within their children and families is that eating requires chewing, it requires, swallowing. And so there is some active participation. And so, right. So that is never underestimated. What I teach with my colleagues, because, what we're trying to do, right, is trying to dismantle some of these systems of oppression. And so oftentimes what happens is also we have to sometimes change the narrative. And so one of the strategies that I've been using is coming at things with an asset lens versus a deficit lens. So what that can mean in plain and simple terms is that, it's very easy for us to say that, this person didn't show up for their meeting. They didn't come to the event. And guess what? They're lazy. They're not taking their responsibilities serious. However, when we look at that from, say, an asset lens, what that means is shifting the onus of the responsibility, not solely on the student. So in your case, Blair, half that deal is that your son needs to, make those steps. But the other half, if there is no organizations or if there is no structures for him to find, it don't matter how many doors he keeps knocking. And so what we need to do is what I do with the colleagues is teach them, okay, what's our responsibility, right? And then when we're thinking about things as far as, a student not showing up or not doing this, have we also thought about what they may be experiencing? So before we go to casting judgment or before we go on and just kind of writing them off and saying this, I think we need to find some time also to be inquisitive about the reason. And not only when the student says, hey, I'm struggling, or the employee says I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time at home, or, maybe I'm having a hard time with my roommate. We need to take that valid, right? We shouldn't just write that off and say, well, that's pretty minor, right? You should be here at 8 a.m. However, right, they're bouncing 2 bus rides trying to get that final car ride. And so it's just some of those things in which when someone gives us a rationale as to why they are experiencing some sort of difficulty or lack of what we want to see, we should try to work with them through that and not really make them feel that they're the worst person, they're bad, and try to look at it how it can be a shared kind of endeavor.
Oh, I love that, because it's all about, right, equality is making sure that they have a seat at the table, right? Belonging is ensuring why they're not at the table. And then equity is if they need to Skype into the table, that we're doing that, right? So we're equally around the table and being able to be engaged in the conversation. So I love the way you put that. And the same thing can be said, related to your point, how do we transfer that over to corporate America when we think about how do we engage and retain Black employees? And it's really thinking about them holistically, which many organizations are doing, and thinking about all your employees' experiences holistically. So I love that. Okay. So I think we have some fun questions real quick, right, Blair? Did you have a wrap up? I know, Blair, sometimes you have some little tidbits that you want to give us. So I don't want to make you take that away from you today if you have some tidbits.
Well, since you asked real quick.
Yes. Go ahead. Yes, exactly.
Fortune magazine says 3 out of 9 ways to promote equity in the workplace. I'll just give you 3. Share equity targets and progress. Number 2, update hiring practices. Number 3, examine your onboarding process. But there are 6 other ways. I would encourage you all to go take a look at that article to find out a little bit more. Thanks, Dee.
Okay. Jared, really quickly, a fun question. What was your first job?
My first job was being a paper delivery.
Okay, interesting.
You were riding your bike? Was it one of those kind of numbers?
It wasn't. I was fortunate enough to have to ride, passenger seat and then kind of jump out and then hit the block a few blocks. But yeah, that was my first job, was delivering the papers at age 14.
Oh, that's awesome.
You better get out there at 14. Quick question. Favorite music artist?
My favorite music artist, I would say it's a toss-up, but I'm going to go with E40, Fonzarelli. That's just my guy. And so, I'm repping the West Coast today.
You said, okay, it's about the Bay today. All right. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, this conversation was really great, very upbeat. We really appreciate all of your knowledge. So thank you again, Jared.
Thank y'all. It's been an honor. I'm appreciative and glad and look forward to keep following y'all.
Thank you. Before we get out of here,
Oh yeah, you know I'm ready for it. Okay, our D rock star of the day is, and our shout out of the day is Mike Kelly, who we both know. And the reason why we're shouting out Mike Kelly, he just got a new position as the Talent and Development Director for Coca-Cola North America. So congratulations to Mike Kelly. He does some fantastic work. Go follow him on LinkedIn. All right, that's my shout out today. Blair, close us out.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate everyone's dedication and support for the movement of the Black Diva Collective. If you're not familiar, we are here every weekday at 12 p.m. Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for your daily dose of D&B with D&B on the Black Diva Collective. One last thing, one last ask besides the like, the follows, the shares, the subscribe. We'd love for you to donate to our cause. We are trying to go to Afrotech to have these wonderful, engaging interviews live and in person. So please make sure that you donate to our Indiegogo. You can find the link on my LinkedIn post. All right, y'all. Have a wonderful day, a great rest of